And if we have any mess ups, we can laugh, we can mess up. It's all good. I'm just going to edit that out. However, it would be very helpful if we're like not just we take a pause of silence and then start where we left off type of thing, or if like dogs or cats or my husband doing dishes out there or something is distracting. I'll be like, hang on, hang on, hang on. So,
Yes.
but with that being said, I'll just go ahead and start, I think. Yeah, you start, right? Yes.
I start?
Don't you?
I think so. It says A, welcome to In the Black.
Am I looking at the wrong thing?
In the
I'm
Black
trying-
intro?
It says S. Thank you for joining us on the episode of In the Black. Oh, I'm looking at the
That's
ending.
the end. Yeah.
See? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. All right. Welcome to In the Black, the podcast that shines a light on resilience, transformation, and the power of reinvention. I'm Araceli, and each week my co-host Shannon and I sit down with incredible women who've faced some of life's hardest challenges, from personal setbacks to societal obstacles, and have emerged on the other side stronger, driven, and ready to make a difference.
On In the Black, we celebrate these stories of strength and success, diving deep into the journeys of women who turn pain into purpose, adversity into action, and now dedicate themselves to making the world a better place in their own way. They're here to inspire, share hard earned wisdom, and to remind us all that no matter how dark things may seem, life is cyclical and dawn is coming. So, whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or just a reminder that change is always possible, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to In the Black. Today, we are speaking with Hazel. And Hazel is a vibrant mom of two and a dedicated author whose passion for enthusiastic living shines through in everything she does. As a trans woman, she inspires others to embrace their authentic selves and live with boundless joy. A lover of all things pink, Hazel's vibrant energy motivates everyone around her to live life to the fullest. Welcome, Hazel. Can you tell us just a little brief snippet about yourself and what you're doing currently?
Absolutely. So I published my book. Well, my name is Hazel. I use she, her pronouns. I published my book in January. And from there, I've tried to have this speaking career from that, where I'm working on my next book as I'm speaking enthusiasm into everyone that I hopefully can reach. I absolutely love the life that I'm living right now, which is a big contrast from where I was a few years ago. And that's what drives me, is this motivation to have everyone have this joy just being themselves.
I love that. Can you take us back to how, like, excuse me one second. That's not the question I want to ask. Could you take us back off the question topic to what made you, what past experiences shaped how you got to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say go back all the way to my childhood, where I wasn't able to live the life that I wanted to live. I grew up, I was born in the 80s, grew up questioning my gender identity, questioning my sexual identity in a world that was not very open to opportunities for asking questions. I remember as a kid even having the questions and feeling too afraid to ask during a world that was facing HIV/AIDS crisis for the queer community, and the gay marriage in the news, and just a lot of anti queer sentiment was happening around me, when I had so many questions about myself. And so I ended up just finding my place hidden, trying to be obscure, out and unnoticed. I used to joke that when I was a kid, I wanted to blend into the furniture, and I did a very good job of it. Just try not to rock the boat. And what that ended up leading to was a life that I was just like hidden, and I didn't even know who I was for decades. And ultimately, it reached a point of real dark, sad point in my mid 30s, when I thought that my life that I had lived was all fake. It was all just built up just to show. people. Like I had this list of like, spouse, kids, suburban house, all these things that you're supposed to be wanting, but it wasn't for me because back when I was a kid, I couldn't just like be myself.
I can definitely relate to that, having grown up in a very harsh household. I think a lot of times it's interesting, and with the societal pressures that were on you, as well as that being at home, I can only imagine how challenging that was. What do you think was the most difficult aspect of the challenge you faced? Was it the external circumstances? Was it your internal struggles? Was it some sort of combination of both of those? What do you think?
I would say it started off external, but then what I realized is how I could survive was just being small and quiet in the world and go unnoticed. I was really concerned that people would understand what I was thinking. So even just a compliment to somebody or a thought, some innocuous, conversation, I was worried that I could be exposed. So I just did this job of like hiding who I was, like sheltering myself, appearing as natural, as normal, as straight, as whatever it was that the world wanted to see me. And it was just like safety for me, safety to be like, I was worried. I mean, I remember some of the things that were happening in the world, and just being afraid that if someone could know my secret, then I could get harmed the same ways.
Could you take us to some or any specific events or people or circumstances that made that situation more difficult or complicated?
Yeah, there's stories I talk about as a childhood when my first crush, back in my childhood, people thought I was male based on how I looked. And I remember my first crush was in seventh grade, it was on a boy. And in fact, I'm not a good singer, not a good singer at all. Don't ask me to sing, but I was in choir because he was in the choir. And I remember, signing up for choir in eighth grade. And then the summer between seventh and eighth grade, just like dreading those times, going back, like maybe someone will figure it out. And I keep going back to that first crush and how scared I was to expose that. And even going in, having these times where I thought I could maybe try to venture out and, be in a non-straight relationship, but I couldn't. I was just always so scared. And I even think back to before I transitioned, thinking like, oh, this is it. Like finding, like I came out as gay in 2018 and thought that this was it. Thought this, I figured it all out, but I still just like couldn't like wrap my head around like what was wrong with me. Um, and I had a great summer, the summer of 2018, like thought I could figure it out, thought I had to figure it out, thought I had this idea that I am this person, and still like struggled and still hid parts of me because it still didn't make sense.
What are some things that were spoken to you or about you that really stuck with you? And what are some of the ways that those have impacted and created negative things that you've said about yourself in the past?
Mm. Yeah, when I was in that summer that I was talking about, when I was between seventh and eighth grade, knowing I had this like crush, but not wanting to call it anything. But I remember sitting down wanting to figure it out. I wanted to figure out if I was gay or straight, because that's what you need to do when you're, 12 years old, 13 years old. And I had this like notebook that I was sort of like making notes, drawing, just being like, what is this? And I remember my mom found the notebook and didn't say much about it at all, other than we don't do that, or we don't talk about this stuff in this house. And that was it. And I felt so ashamed, so just small and sad that, I tried to like figure out who I was, and I only met it with resistance. And it was, I still remember that. I still remember it. I talk about it in my book. I talk about just that moment of, not like the little bit of expression that I had for myself in my early adolescence was just met with just, you can't do this.
How were you able to manage those feelings?
I eventually developed a substance abuse problem. In my, a few years later, I was, smoking weed as much as I could, drinking, and eventually the drinking that I was doing as a teen and manifested into like a real problem in my college years. I mean, it was in my late teens that I was being told I had a drinking problem, and it only became worse. That was how I just like coped. It was this way to forget about it for a few hours each night, and then try to just overcome the day to get to the part that I can forget again. And it was a substance abuse was an issue for me for decades. From my teenage years, really becoming a daily issue where I was just drinking to pass out every night for the first half of my 30s.
Did you feel, have you had you found any support during that time with like one friend or someone that stood out and accepted you, or did you just keep that within you while you were finding those mechanisms to cope?
I felt like a fake person. No one actually knew who I was. I mean, I didn't even know who I was. Like, keep in mind, different name, different identity. And I just built up these walls. So if I was talking to somebody at school and, if I was working and talk to somebody at working, like I was just conforming and fitting to the area that I was knowing people. And there was no, I didn't really have friends. I didn't have, anyone to talk to. And there was a point every weekend I spent at home by myself, mostly in my early high school. Eventually I had some friends, but it was still like, it was what the situation fit or what the situation needed. That's how I fit into the situation. And it was just, I was very thin as far as no one knew the depths of who I am because I didn't know. I had like hidden it so far down, because I was scared. Like, there's no way this person could have come out like Hazel as me in the teens, and me like trying to rationalize and explain that. It was just like, I need to be as small as possible, as fake as possible, so no one knew who I was.
That sounds so challenging. I can't even imagine. I mean, just going through I have teenagers right now, and going through the teen years without that additional like stress and pressure to hide who you are when you're trying to figure out how you fit into the world and how you can interact with your peers and all of that. I can imagine that would be extremely challenging. So you said that you struggled with alcoholism and addiction for several decades. What When did you decide that you wanted things to be different, or was there like a specific moment? Was it more of a gradual realization, like you realized one thing and then a little while later you realized something else? Like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, and there wasn't a specific moment. I just know it was getting worse. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and about 9 years ago we moved down here. I was married, had two kids, still have two kids. But that moment of moving and going into like a bigger city and a new opportunity, just allowed me to like have this problem. And that's where I like elevated again. So it's still like a problematic drinking problem that became worse when we sort of isolated ourselves in a new city, and the relationship wasn't the greatest. I mean, I think we both would admit that now, that it wasn't a great relationship. We have a great friendship, but it wasn't a great marriage. And having our lives rely on this not so great marriage made it our like lives worse. And I just kept going back to the drinking, and then eventually I just started to hate myself for the drinking, and the drinking became worse because that's how I coped with hating myself. I would hate myself all day, drink, forget that I hated myself, then wake up the next morning and just like dreaded looking in the mirror. And there was a time, in 2018, so a couple of years after we moved to Kansas City, I started to see a therapist in around my 36th birthday, so in February, and I started to explore parts of like why it was actually about drinking, and it was sort of a let's start on our own, go into couples therapy, and it was just like my drinking was so problematic that that was the root of everything. And I realized as I started to uncover who I was, that I was this fake person. It was that, right around my 36th birthday, I was just like, I don't know what this life is that I have other than drinking. I would just always be constantly thinking about that. And it became worse. Just like the depression became worse, and the drinking, was just always right along with it. And there was a day in March that I hit rock bottom. It wasn't with like alcohol getting sober. It was the day that I wanted to end my life. And it was sort of this drinking, getting through, like forgetting about it, that sort of made me survive that day and wanting to see my kids. But the drinking problem wasn't there. It was still there and it remained there. But the rock bottom is kind of independent of my sobriety journey. The sobriety journey happened because of some mistakes that I made, and I needed to do it, but it was like perfectly timed in a way that the anchor situation of wanting to end my life was starting the path upwards towards where I wanted to be.
Could you take us into that transition, into that, into down that path where you wanted to be?
Yeah, it was a quite a long journey. I think back, one of the therapist questions was like, when was the first time you started to question who you were? And I kept going backwards, right? I started to be like, oh, I found my name. And I started to go, question who I was, question the people I like, question how I wanted the world to see me, and going back and further, further, further. But it was this exploration of who I am that, you know, actually, can we start? Can you ask that question again? We'll go back. Sorry.
Sorry. Yes, I was asking, what did I ask? Shannon, you're good at this. What did I ask, Shannon? Oh, take us down the path. He was talking. She was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So take us, or could you take us down that journey, that path that led you into the transition?
Yeah, so I was like thinking about, myself in that point in the, spring of 2018 when I was at my lowest, and where, just like shaking my life as far as like, what have I been like living this like life I don't know that I've been living for 30 something years. And I kept just thinking about is like how to get through and not wanting to disappoint my kids, not wanting to disappoint them, and trying to say like, oh, they had a parent who did this or had a parent who did that. It was bad enough that I had a drinking problem, and I thought that I could like hide it from them. But the reality is, kids are too smart. Even kids at a young age know what's going on. And there was this like idea that I don't want to disappoint them or have their life any harder. But yet I still couldn't like have, there wasn't a foundation for me to build myself on. And so the path was one of like an up and down, like where it started low, felt up a little bit, but it was always just kept going down until the moment that I was made this like egregious mistake. And it was a year after this year day in, so in April 1st, 2019. So April Fool's Day was fitting that it was my first day sober in 20 years. But it was actually a mistake that I had with just, the law and everything. And so had to get sober. And it was this idea that I couldn't, it was potentially losing my kids. And it was this idea that it was finally there. It was right in front of me. You had to do this. And that's when I finally got sober. But I started to think back to all the times that I was hiding myself, and I was actually really scared. One of the interesting things about getting sober is that you don't know, getting sober after like decades of drinking, is that you don't know who you are anymore. And like, that was fitting with everything. Like drinking was helping me cope with this, while drinking was the thing I needed to get past and get through. And the whole time that I needed to try to be this example for my kids, but it was the example I never had as a kid. And so it was this circular journey that I felt like I kept going through. So the path was a big circle, a big, what is it, like a tube down into just this abyss where I was completely lost.
Such a huge journey. I know that I have been by the side of someone who struggled with addiction, and helping her to get clean and sober, and how challenging that can be. What was the very first step? And did you face new challenges as you started to go through that? What did that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, the first step was the day, I wanted to end my life. It's where I begin it's the first chapter of my book. It was the day, and I remember it like clearly. It was March 30th, 2018. Like it was a day, like I go back to this location, and it was the day that shook up my life. Like I didn't quite comprehend all of it, even though I wasn't like sober. It was at that point, it was opening up the opportunity for me to explore who I am. And I came out as gay a few months later, and then started questioning my gender identity a few months after that. But it was this moment. I mean, I sat in a park in like a 50-degree day for several hours all by myself, questioning how I even arrived at this point. But from there, not everything started to make sense, but it was this path towards discovery of myself at what I call the lowest point of my life. And I often go back to this place. Like I'll go back to this park. It's the cover of my book. Is this place I was, because it was this like reminder. Like I keep going back, and like a part of it was traumatic in the beginning, but now it's this reminder that I've made it so far. This path that's gone circles around, Kansas City, and all different sorts of careers, all different sorts of like everything, expressions about who I am, all started on this low spot on a cold day in a park all by myself for hours.
Araceli, do you want the next question?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure how to reword this. So, looking back, are there any details about the challenges you faced that you didn't really fully understand at that time, but have more clarity now?
Oh, absolutely. Something I grew up just sort of hiding is the feminine like aspects of who I am, this feminine energy that I absolutely just like love about who I am. I didn't understand. I mean, it was something that when I talk about hiding parts of me, that part I was like hiding and dreading to expose. But what's interesting is that when I was drinking to a point that I would be like buzzed or intoxicated, like I'd often be a little bit more feminine, and it was okay. And then when I came out as gay, it was okay. And I think back to the journey that I have. The first time I had clothes that match my like expression now was years before I actually could wear it comfortably. And there's times where I'm just like, why did I like? Of course, like there were so many things that pointed to it. Liking pink, wearing makeup. I wore makeup for years before I transitioned, and it was just the thing that I liked. But there's so many parts of me that I finally was able to do it. I was finally able to start accepting it. And I look back I mean, some of the friends that I had back in fifth grade were just girls. You know, they were girls that were in my class, but I was like, why did I want to be friends with them? And I thought it was just like having a crush on them, but it wasn't. You know, it was just this idea of wanting to have that feminine energy matching me and being okay with it. While at the same time, then I would get out and be like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. I have to have a crush. But I look back, like I've been wearing makeup for way longer than I've been Hazel, and I've been having clothes that are feminine. I have, you know, I dyed my hair in college. You know, I did all these things that are like feminine that I really liked, but I just still couldn't like fully embrace it. It was this ebb and flow of like, oh, you can do this, but not too much. Oh, this was too much. Go back. You know, cut my hair. You know, hide all the things, stuff everything in the closet. All, you know, and so it wasn't until I started to live on my own and started to be comfortable enough to just respond to people. You know, there's so much pressure in my life to conform. I remember, you know, coming home from school and in elementary school and being like, oh, who's your crush? It was always this like had to be a straight relationship and it had to be all these things. And I had to, you know, I couldn't be myself until I started to like let it happen a little bit. And now I just like love it. I mean, that's one of the things that inspires me each and every day to just be myself. Like I love my hair. I love that people like enjoy seeing me. I mean, people tell me all the time that I make them smile, and it makes me so happy because it's me. It's the parts of me that I get to be as loud as possible because so many versions of me in the past couldn't.
I wanted to go back to the when you mentioned your mom and the journal she found. So, what does that relationship look like now?
Um, I don't talk to her. It's been about a year and a half at this point. When last time I talked to her, she was telling me how the church that she was in, which was being more conservative, was okay for her to go to, and still like try to reconcile it with like having me. I don't. I try to tell her that the people that she's going to church with and supporting are people that are dangerous to me, and I don't know that it's working. I don't know. So there is not really a relationship right now. I let her. I let my kids talk to her as much as they want to, but you know, I'm just here to support my kids and not tell them what to do. But yeah, it's not. It's not. Nothing's happening with that.
That's
Yeah,
so hard.
must be.
So I kind of like to study the language that we use in our thoughts and in our everyday life. And I'm just curious, like, I'm sure that you had thoughts and language in your world that were very negative about who you were or who you couldn't be. Um, what did the process look like for changing that? Was it counseling? Did you do affirmations? Like what kind of things did you do to help change to where you feel so comfortable and vibrant with who you are now?
It was, I mean, finding my name was a big part of it. I found my name March 9th, 2021. I mean, it's a day I remember. I remember the moment. And it was almost like once I found my name, even though I didn't tell anybody for a couple months, it was this new, like, Hazel can do this. Hazel can be this way. And the world, like the person that I used to be, had the world had control over that person, and I was finally able to do it because it's me. Like I'm Hazel. Like I can do this. And even when I get sad about, you know, the anti-trans situation, and you know, now it's the federal government, but in the state that I live, I was still, you know, I could be sad, but I'm like, I can do this. Like Hazel can do this. You have done so much already, and you know, it's me. Like I joke with like, this is me. This is who I am. I love it, and it's really just like finding my name and starting to form the identity that is the person on the inside. So as I keep doing this, and even just like some of the things, like some of it's just coincidence. Like I find these, you know, I do a lot of thrift shopping, and I find these clothes that I love. I The pink hair was something I just did on a whim, and I just fell in love with it. And it was like what I fell in love with the reactions that I was getting with people. Fell in love with how the world was seeing me. And it was just this moment of being like, Hazel is this way. Hazel's the one who walks into a room and everyone notices her. And also she's going to go say hi to everybody because that's who she is. And it was, like I said, it was my name. It was me being myself and just being like, I can do it because I'm me.
That is amazing to hear. I want to go back and touch on the language that you used for yourself during the beginning and now to where you are now.
You mean sort of before I transitioned, like as a kid and everything, or?
Yes. So, were you speaking to yourself negatively, or were you, um, what was your self-talk during, when you were a kid, when you were middle school, high school, and
Mhm.
then into college years into now?
Yeah, it was, there was very little positive said about myself to myself. I, you know, I actually like kept, I kept a journal at multiple points in my life. And there was a journal I kept during the time that I was the most depressed. And it was so harsh. I didn't say a single positive thing about myself as far as I can remember. I used to just hate. I mean, I would like, I don't use the word hate very often, as far as like saying I hate something, but I used to hate who I was. I hated the way I looked. I hated, waking up hungover every day. I hated mirrors. I couldn't even look at myself in a mirror for so long because I just couldn't stand what I saw. And it was this like disgust with who I was. And the journal I kept, as I was leading up to that day that my first chapter of my book, I just remember, nothing good. And I read it years later and it almost felt like I couldn't, like I remember writing the words, like I remember those words coming out of my like hand, but I couldn't even understand the logic anymore. I spent, after I transitioned, I spent so much time in front of the mirror, smiling and happy, and just being like, "You're beautiful. Like like you're beautiful. You're amazing. Like look at this journey." Even now, I'm still just amazed at how far I've come. And people. Something I tell people is that when people are like criticize who I am or don't understand the transgender experience, I don't worry about what they have to say to me because the worst stuff that's been said about me has been my words to me. There was nothing good. I just, yeah. And I honestly thought everyone just was depressed for decades. Like I was miserable and nothing good was said about myself to myself, until I transitioned at age 39.
Wow. It's amazing the power of our words and the power of how we can control our thoughts. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I recently got my neurolinguistics programming certification. That's such a mouthful, but it has made me so fascinated with how that impacts how we perceive ourselves and other people. And it is also interesting how when we stop judging ourselves and we learn how to love ourselves, how that bleeds over into the rest of the world. And we're like, oh, well, I'm not judging, so I don't think they're judging either.
Right.
And so it's kind of a beautiful journey to really dive into the words that we say to ourselves. And I think it's awesome that you had that journal that you can refer back to. Were there any smaller, like early victories or breakthroughs, like when you were in the hardest times, like say between March 2018 and when you had the incident with the law in 2019? Were there like some small victories that gave you a glimpse of hope or some direction?
Yeah, I mean, coming out as gay, the world, saw me as male, and I finally was able to accept, what the type of person I wanted to be with. And it was in May of 2018 that I started to accept that and admit it to myself, and then admit it to my spouse at the time, and which ended the marriage. But having that bit of, I went against the grain. I went against the idea that I should live this certain way. And it was a good time. Like, I enjoyed, you know, being able to like say a word like I'm gay, and it being like okay was the first time that it like was able to be different than the expectations. It didn't last a long time, but it was that. And then later on, they say it didn't last a long time because I started to question again, like it didn't feel right. And I have a friend who asked me for the first time if I thought I was transgender in November of 2018. So I was months out of coming out as gay, and I still wasn't like feeling right. But it was this moment of like, oh my gosh, maybe I am. I mean, it still took me 3 years to finally admit it to myself, but it was it was a small little, just, it was a moment I held on to for a very long time. I mean, I thought maybe not daily, but multiple times a week, like maybe I am trans, maybe I am, non-binary. I thought about using he, they pronouns. I, changed my look a little bit as much as I could, but there's a couple things in there. Even when I went, I went into detox to get sober safely. I was at a problem that, I needed to seek professional help. And even when I went to detox, I brought makeup, I brought makeup just so I can like do this. And I remember the staff there was like, oh, and I'm like, oh, I'm pansexual. I don't know all these things. And it was part of that journey, even into sobriety, that it was like, I still don't know who I am, but it was okay. Now I was accepting that I'm sober now.
So I love hearing I'm out of frame now. I love hearing the transition and how like you went from almost feeling lost most of your life. Is that accurate? To now you're just living your best life. So that's just, what everyone should be feeling, and that's what our podcast really, I'm hoping that it'll inspire others to, live their best life unapologetically, and to just, find their purpose, find their mission, which brings me to a question that's going to lead to that one second. There's a question about, sorry, I'm taking forever.
You're fine.
You're fine. Can I ask a question while you're looking for that one? So I'm just curious. You have a book out. You've referenced that several times. I've actually read your book. It's lovely. And I'm just wondering, are you in the process of writing another book? Do you have another project or something that's exciting you? Tell me a little bit more about like what you're doing right now.
Yes, absolutely. So I am working on another book. It's alongside some of the speaking that I've been doing. When I first endeavored into this book that I wrote already, I knew this was a whole project. I knew it wasn't just me writing my story. It was me. I asked myself what I wanted to do with this world, with this life. Like, how can I inspire? I asked myself, like, how can I inspire everyone to have what I had? even back then in 2022 is I loved who I was and I wanted more of that in the world. And so I was like, I'm going to write my story to show everybody that I went from this place of like depression, substance abuse, hating myself to loving myself in like 3 years. And then this next one is more of a inspirational how-to, probably fit on the self-improvement section of the bookstore, as opposed to LGBTQ memoirs, which is where this book is. And like I said, the speaking that I'm doing is along those lines of like living enthusiastically. That's sort of the working title right now, is living enthusiastically. How do you find your life you're enthusiastic to live? Where my book is called Enthusiastically Me, my discovery of a life I'm enthusiastic to live. Like I do, I work some side jobs, I work these other things because like this is what I love to do. Like I hear this, people say they love my message, I make them smile. This is what I live for. I love it. It's great. Like I'm so lucky, I'm so happy for what I get to do, even though sure I'm working all the time, but I love it.
If you could give our listeners one piece of advice to help them find purpose and turn their challenges into positive change, what would it be?
And find the life you're enthusiastic to live, like who you are, like have the world see you as you see you, and be yourself. And don't be afraid to set boundaries. I think that setting boundaries is so important, because if we're compromising who we are, then if we're compromising who we are to be with somebody or be a part of something, it's not something we should be a part of, and it's okay. Our culture and our community is that we should be like this noble sacrifice. Like I want that to be out of this world. Like we shouldn't be sacrificing ourselves for this greater like idea when we can't be our best. Like be your best, be yourself, let the world see you as you see you, and then figure out everything else.
I absolutely love that. I think authenticity is a huge thing. And actually, when you're looking at energetics, because obviously we're all made up of these atoms that are moving at different speeds, right? And so everyone thought that the highest frequency would be love, and it's actually authenticity. And I think that's so powerful. So we have some closing questions, and they're just really quick. Being in the black. So in the black is a financial term, and it refers to being in the positive. So being in a good space in your life. What does that mean to you personally?
For me, it's waking up every day excited to do the day, whatever it is you're doing, and being excited and knowing that I'm me. Like I get up and get to be me, and whatever it is, I look forward to it.
How do you envision your work and impact growing in the future?
Right now I'm trying to build a little bit of a following on social media ahead of my next book. And then to me, the next book is something that hopefully can get me into bigger stages and bigger audiences. And I'm kind of taking a coaching approach to the big stage. I look at some of these people on the stage who are these inspirational speakers, the people everyone knows, and it's like, why can't it be me? Like, why can't I be the one who's doing it? And so I want to, keep doing my social media so that it's accessible to everybody, and then being in places on stages in front of thousands of people, hopefully inspiring them. But I think my next book, like that's my goal, is that this is the one that everyone can take into their own life.
Perfect. That actually answered our next question, which is what's next on your journey. So, if someone were to come up to you and say, "Hey, Hazel, I really want to pursue my passion," what would your one best piece of advice be for them?
Listen to yourself. I tell people, when you're questioning something about what you're doing, whether it's a relationship, job, just hobby, what is your first thought when you wake up? What is the thing you want that gets you out of bed? I believe that our brain is sort of processing information, cleansing itself, and all the other things that are happening in the world sort of like fogs our thoughts. But what is the first thing you think of in the morning? What is the thing that gets you out of bed and excited? And just start exploring that every day and be like, what is the thing? Like, what's your favorite thing? I also ask myself, and when I'm out with the walk on a walk with my kids, I say, like, what are we grateful for? What are you grateful for? What is the best thing that happened to you today? And start just recognizing that great things are happening to you at this moment and not worry about the negatives.
And lastly, where can our listeners find you?
Absolutely. Social media, I'm at Hazel G. Krebs on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. TikTok's my favorite. I am on enthusiastically-you.com is my website, which is linked on all the social media. So social media is the easiest.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to step back a little bit because I also ask my kids almost every day what they're grateful for. And then on Sundays, we have family meeting and they have to tell me something that they love about each other and themselves each Sunday. And so again, going back to that power of our words and our thoughts and redirecting our thoughts through our words. And I just think it's awesome that you are teaching your kids that. So good job.
Thank you. I think that's wonderful, and I may take part of that.
Absolutely. So thank you to our listeners for joining us today on this episode of In the Black. I hope that Hazel's story left you feeling inspired and reminded you of the incredible strength that does lie within each of us. Hazel took her toughest challenges and transformed them into something absolutely beautiful, and showing us that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to bring light to the world. So I really appreciate that, Hazel.
I appreciate both of you, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I've enjoyed it so very much.
Thank you. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share In the Black with another woman who could use a little encouragement. Together, we're building a community of passion, purpose, and power. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and remember your story matters. Your choices change things, and being your most authentic self can and will change the world around you. Thank you so much.
Yay!
Oh, that was
Thank you.
so awesome. Oh, and I love that teal cup. I think that one too. Oh no, wait, mine's purple. But it's
There were so many different directions I wanted to take, like dopamine dressing. Have you heard of that? Like dopamine dressing and dopamine decor?
No.
Okay, so when you were talking about like putting on the clothes that made you feel like yourself finally, there is this whole, it's a trend right now, but I think it's genius. It's dopamine dressing. It's like instead of looking to what anybody else thinks you should wear, you just wear what makes you feel amazing. And so like a lot of people are wearing like different colors and patterns and stuff together that you wouldn't normally see because it makes them happy, and then decorating their houses in the same way instead of like having some cohesive thing. They're like, oh, I love this coffee table. It makes me happy. I love it. It's beautiful to me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just think that's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I'm sitting in the place that I just moved in this month, and yeah, there is this feeling of like this is finally my place, and I love it because, yeah, I love that. I didn't know that was the term, but I often just wear the things that make me happy, and yeah.
Dopamine dressing. There you go.
Dopamine dressing.
Now
I
you
love
know.
it.
So, well, I really appreciate you, Hazel. I know that you were kind of on a tight deadline, and I am as well. So,
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Really, I do. It's so much. I always love seeing you, Shannon.
you
And it's so
too.
nice to meet you, Araceli.
nice to meet you too. Hopefully we'll run into each other in the future, or whatever the universe brings.
Yeah. Are you in Kansas City? Are you
I'm in Florida.
Florida? Okay.
Yes. We just moved here as well, so my office is still the last one to get put together, but
I won't tell you what's over here. Like the behind me, certain parts are like fine and put together, but other parts are where everything else is.
Yes.
The process of moving. So fun.
Exactly.
Hopefully we can get Shannon to move out to Florida soon.
No.
Oh,
You guys can fight over me.
There
It's
we go.
fine.
well,
All
thank
right.
you so much,
Thank you,
guys.
Hazel.
I will
Thank
talk to
you.
you later.
Bye.
All right. I did not end that. End now. End recording.